Today is Friday, February 18th, and this is William Michael of the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. Tonight I'd like to talk to homeschooling parents or parents who are considering homeschooling. I'd like to share a relatively simple message, nothing philosophical. Sometimes I know these talks can get philosophical, can get pretty deep. Often I'm speaking to people who have been working with me in classical Catholic studies for some time. And I know it's important uh, to remember the family's just getting started. And so tonight, I'd like to take some time to address a simple issue for parents who are either getting started in homeschooling, rethinking their homeschooling, or are looking forward to a day that's coming when they're going to begin homeschooling. And what I'd like to explain to you is the difference between what most families do in the name of homeschooling, which I call modern homeschooling, and what needs to be done in order to give your children a classical Catholic education, which I'll call classical Catholic homeschooling. So I'd like to provide a simple comparison and help you understand what's done in the name of modern homeschooling and what you're going to need to do if you would like to give your children a classical Catholic education at home. These are two very different undertakings, two very different worlds. And I'd like to help you understand the differences so that you can begin to think about what you need to do to succeed in the work of providing your children with a classical Catholic education. Now, everything that I share in this talk is available in a simple infographic or image that I've published on the website. If you go to the Classical Liberal Arts Academy website and you scroll down to the bottom of the page or use the search feature and you look for the article titled "The Difference Between Modern and Classical Catholic Homeschooling," the difference between modern and classical Catholic homeschooling, you'll see an image that I've prepared that summarizes everything that I'm going to share in this talk. And I think that that will be helpful for you. So you might want to look that up, but I'm going to explain everything in that graphic in this talk. Now, just to provide a little bit of context and background, homeschooling was not very popular throughout American history. The public school system, private schools, if you think about the Catholic parochial school system, these were important institutions in American society. There was controversy between them. The public school system that developed in the late 1800s was disapproved of by the Catholic Church at that time. And at the Council of Baltimore in the 1880s, the bishops of the church in America insisted that parishes establish affordable, if not free, Catholic schools for children in Catholic parishes so that they wouldn't attend the public schools, because the public schools at that time were heavily influenced by Protestant ideas and teaching. And the bishops of the Catholic Church were discerning enough to say Catholic kids shouldn't be in those schools. And so these parallel school systems were established. The public schools, on one hand, which were Protestant and strongly American in their character, and then the parochial Catholic schools, which developed and became very influential. So that was going on in the late 1800s as we enter into the 1900s, and that continued through the 1950s and 60s and into the 70s. But as time went on, American culture went through a number of really challenging times. Think of the World Wars, and then time after the World Wars when America got into the Vietnam War and the Civil Rights Movement. There were a lot of political protests and a lot of unrest, and Americans began to rethink uh, their relationship with the government. A lot of trust was lost because of scandals and things that had happened over time. And Americans started to rethink education and what they should do. And in the 1970s, the idea of homeschooling started to gain some traction. And as we moved into the 1980s, it became more and more uh, common in discussion. And then when we got into the 1990s, especially when the internet became available, homeschooling really started to take root and become popular. And now there are millions and millions of children being homeschooled. So, homeschooling, I would say 1990s is really the time when homeschooling started to become popular, largely because of the internet. And now in 2022, it's very common to homeschool, especially after COVID, when COVID sent so many kids home and remote learning became a necessity, and people realized just how much can be done academically from home. And today, homeschooling is very, very common. That's sort of an overview of education and the history of homeschooling and where homeschooling came from in America. Now, the problem with homeschooling is that when homeschooling developed, it largely developed because parents were unhappy with the schools that were available for their children. They weren't happy with the culture of the public schools. They weren't happy with the academic standards of the public schools. They weren't happy with the behavior of students. When I say culture, I mean the overall student population, the idea that anyone who shows up at the public school is allowed in and your children are immersed in bad company. And contrary to what anyone says, sacred scripture tells us that bad company corrupts good morals. Children should not be with bad company. And so parents realized that there were a lot of bad influences in the public schools, and it seemed like that influence was growing more and more influential, or more and more intense, I should say. And parents really became convinced that they needed to pull their kids out of the schools. And then if they looked at local private schools, what we find in the private schools is really not a private school intellectual culture of any kind. We just find the public school curriculum being offered to students at private school tuition. And if you wonder, why would anyone do that? Why would anyone pay a private school tuition for a public school curriculum? The answer is that by charging a private school curriculum, we can control who comes into the school, and it will produce a better crowd of students, a better company for our children. And the private school, even though it offers the same curriculum, the experience might be a little bit better because we can hope that the student body will be, what should I say? The student body will be made up of kids who come from better families, families who can afford to pay tuition. Obviously, you understand the idea there. And that's true. I worked in those private schools, and I can testify that the population, the student body at a private school, especially as tuition rises, gets better and better because you have more committed parents, you have kids from better families, and so on. So that's definitely true. But the problem is that they're still getting a public school curriculum. And everything that the private schools do is just compared to the public school, and it's always private schools boasting that they're one step above the public schools. And while that's okay, that's really not what private schooling is supposed to be. Private schooling is supposed to be focused on high intellectual standards, and modern private schools simply aren't focused on high standards. They're focused on college admission and just keeping one step ahead of the public schools. So when families looked at their options in schooling, they saw public school on one side, and that was a turnoff. And then when they looked on the private school side, they saw basically expensive public schooling. And very few families are going to justify spending private school money for a public school education. And that's why homeschooling became an interest. And most families who chose to homeschool did so because they thought it would be better for their children morally to be with their family where they're immersed in their family culture and religion. It would be better morally. But the parents usually think that they can do a better job and give their children a higher quality of education working with them at home. But the problem with homeschooling is that most parents, I can almost say all parents at this point in history, almost all parents have nothing but a public school education or a private school education that is simply a high tuition public school education. So when it's time for parents to think about education, they have only the mind of public schooling. And what modern homeschooling is, and what the fatal flaw of modern homeschooling is that the parents simply offer a public school education to their children at home. They commit the same fault that the private schools commit. Modern homeschooling is really little more than public school at home. And there's a number of reasons why the modern public school curriculum is simply not appropriate for homeschooling. I want to say that again. The public school curriculum, the modern grade level K to 12 public school curriculum is not appropriate for homeschooling. And that's what I'd like to talk about a little bit. When we look at a public school, like I said, the public schools were created in the 1800s. They were created with a political purpose. They were created to serve the interests of the state. The arguments for creating public schools was that they would get kids off the streets, which was an important problem. At that time in America, we had very great immigration, millions of people coming into America from overseas, and many of those kids were just getting dumped into the streets, and their parents were struggling to find work and to establish lives in America. The children were left idle. Many of them ended up in factories and were taken advantage of by businessmen, and the rest of them were left in the streets, and the situation was terrible. And so the political argument for public schooling is that these are the future citizens of our country. We need to get them off the streets. We need to get them out of these sweatshop factories that are trying to make money off them, and we need to get these kids into schools where we can provide them with an education that will prepare them for life in America. And there were two concerns in the public school education. First of all of these immigrants had to be Americanized. They had to be taught how America works. They had to be taught how to live in a democratic society. They had to be Americanized. And secondly, they had to be provided with a basic education that would allow them to become productive members of the growing American economy. They had to be taught how to live in a democracy, and they had to be developed so that they could contribute and help build the economy. So, Americanization and workplace training were the goals of the public school system. Now, at that time, the Industrial Revolution was underway. You had men like Henry Ford inventing the assembly line. And as those ideas of manufacturing products at a great scale were developing, the thinkers and the engineers of early 20th century American society were looking at the assembly lines and the factories and were really developing clear principles for efficient operation. Efficiency was the goal of everything at that time. They learned that efficiency is how we make money. Efficiency is how things get done. Efficiency allows for mass production. Efficiency makes our culture rich and improves our quality of life. And so when the time came to look at the public schools, those men who had these ideas of efficiency and mass production took the ideas that they had developed in industry, and they applied them to this new challenge of public education. And the schools were basically designed to work like assembly lines. And just like an assembly line is not designed to produce the best cars, it's designed to produce the greatest profit for the owners of the factory, and also to produce better wages for the people working in the factory. The public schools were developed in the same way. Public schools were great for the government, and they were great for the employees of the public schools, but they weren't designed for the individual students any more than an assembly line is designed for an individual car. And so there were large numbers of children that had to be educated. The public schools had access to state funding. They could simply raise taxes. They didn't have to worry about developing a school program that was affordable. It didn't have to be profitable or sustainable. They had money to burn because they could simply raise taxes for the public schools, which all of us know very well of. So they were free to develop a school system where money was really no object. And they were led by these industrialist men like John Dewey and Frederick Taylor. Those are some names you can look up if you're interested. And these men designed the schools to work like factories. These large numbers of students, really all of the American population, all of the children, they had to be run through these schools and provided with this efficient assembly line education that was available. They had to figure out how they were going to organize these students, how they were going to actually handle all of these children. And so what they decided to do was build a school system that took children from the age of 5 or 6 and led them grade by grade or year by year through their childhood until they were ready for adulthood at age 18. And so a 12-year school system was developed. That's where we get the K to 12 model from. The school was designed to take the children from the earliest age when they could be separated from their families, age 5 or 6, and keep them until they were ready for adult life at age 18, when they were legally free to get to work and become adult members of the American citizenry. So the public school was designed to uh, direct the childhood years of every American child. And so a 12-year school system developed that was run like an assembly line. All of the students went in, they were all given the same education, and they were simply graded based on their performance within that school system. Just like a car or a whole assembly line of cars would be run through the factory and then at the end inspected and graded. Any defects were pulled out. All of the cars that passed inspection were approved and were stamped, approved, and ready for distribution. And in the same way, the public school system took all the kids in, ran them through the system, and simply inspected them at various points and judged them like a quality control inspection. And so not only was it a 12-year system, not only was it a one-size-fits-all system, but it was a system that simply graded student performance. And that's how the public school was organized and developed and how it operated. And most of us have experienced that. Most of us have been through the modern K-12 school system where you get in kindergarten and you get graded every marking period, every semester, every year, and you go from grade to grade up from the time you're 5 or 6 years old until you're 18 and ready for adult life. And you graduate with a diploma and a grade point average and a class rank, and you're ranked and sorted among your peers by the school system. That's the model and idea of American public education. Now, if that's all we have to think about, how we can provide a social service with political benefits for American children, there's really nothing intrinsically wrong with public schooling. It's better than nothing. The alternative to just leave kids loose on the streets, leave kids idle for crime or abuse by other adults, is obviously a far worse alternative than public schooling. And that's what public schooling was for. The problem is that over time, Americans have abused the public school system, and now you have lawyers and doctors sending their kids to public schools to play tennis and golf and get prepared for Ivy League college admission. And that's not what public schools are for, and that's what destroys the public school system. It gets spread too thin. It starts to try to become an everything for everyone, and eventually it fails to serve the kids that it was designed to serve, the kids who had no other options. Half of the kids in modern public schools should actually be in private schools, and they take advantage of the public school as a social service. But let's just summarize again the characteristics of this modern K-12 public school. First of all, it's a tax-funded school model designed to serve the interests of the state. It's a tax-funded school model designed to serve the interests of the state. Second, students, a large number of students, are brought into the school and they're sorted by age. They're sorted by their birth date. And they're served by the school as a group. They're sorted by age and they're served as a group. I, for example, was with the same group of kids from the time I was 5 years old until I graduated high school at age 18. I grew up and stayed in the same hometown my entire childhood. I had the same kids in my classes when I was in preschool that were in my classes when I graduated high school. I was sorted by my age, grouped with a class of students, and we stayed together through our entire K-12 education. and we were served by our teachers year by year as a group. The education we received was intended for the group. Third, students in public schools are led through a scheduled program, and that program grades and ranks the students. The students are led through a scheduled program. The schedule is already prepared, the program is already prepared, and the students are led through that program according to the schedule, and they are simply graded and ranked as they work through that program. Next, that curriculum, that program in the public school is centered on modern mathematics and natural sciences. It's focused, the curriculum is focused on modern mathematics and natural sciences. And one of the reasons why it has to be so is because in our society there's a separation of church and state. And because the public school is operated by the state, the schools can't teach religion. They can only teach material subjects based on observation. And so the only subjects that a public school can really focus on are modern mathematics and natural sciences. That's the fourth attribute of the modern public school. Fifth, the study materials that are used in the public school. The study materials used in the public school are designed for that public school program. They're designed for classes and grade levels. They're designed for groups of children taught by teachers, and those study materials are intended to grade the children. The study materials themselves are designed for the K-12 public school system. And lastly, the public school program is designed assuming that a large faculty of specialized teachers is available to administer this program. The school is designed and assumes that a large faculty of specialized teachers is available to administer this grade level curriculum. So these are, six characteristics of the public school education. Really quick to review. It's a tax-funded school model designed to serve the interests of the state. Second, students are sorted by age and served as a group. Third, students are led through a scheduled program for grading and ranking. Fifth, the curriculum is centered on modern mathematics and the natural sciences. Next, study materials are designed for classes and grading. And lastly, the program is designed for a large faculty of specialized teachers, and that's possible because the school is tax-funded, and there's money available to pay all of these people to work. That's the public school system. That's modern education. And like I said before, what most homeschool families do is simply bring the public school K-12 program home for homeschooling. Let's really focus on that. What nearly all homeschool families do is present that public school K-12 grade level program to their children at home. That's what modern homeschooling is. But if you look through those characteristics, if you look through those 6 characteristics, you can see that that K-12 public school program is not appropriate for a homeschool family. It's not appropriate for a homeschool family. It doesn't serve the needs of a homeschool family. Let's consider what a homeschool family needs in comparison to these characteristics of the K to 12 modern public school program. First of all, the homeschool is not a tax-funded school. The homeschool is operating on the parents' resources. It's a privately funded school model. Homeschooling is a privately funded school model. And it's not designed to serve the interests of the state. It's not a tax-funded model. Money is very much an object in homeschooling. And it's not intended to serve the interests of the state. Homeschooling is a privately funded activity, and it's designed to serve the interests of the individual student. Homeschooling is a privately funded model of education designed to serve the interests of the individual student. That's a major difference from the public school system, and the public school program is not appropriate in a privately funded environment that's intended to serve the interests of an individual student. The K to 12 model is not appropriate for homeschooling. Secondly, in the public school, children are all sorted by age, and they're dealt with as a group of children of the same age. They're sorted by age, and they're served as a group of peers of the same age. In a homeschool, students are not sorted by age. A parent who is homeschooling has a number of children of different ages. They are not sorted by age like public school students. Students are not sorted by age at home, and they are served not as a group, but as individuals. A homeschool parent has to work with the children as individuals because they're not sorted. They're not 3 children of the same age. There will be 3 children or 4 children or 2 children of different ages, and they have to be served as individuals. And so the public school model doesn't apply in homeschooling. Third, whereas in public schools, the children are led through a scheduled program and graded or ranked, in a homeschool, that's not true. Students need to be led through a self-paced program because they're working individually. Students can work through a self-paced program, and they can individually pursue mastery in their studies. Homeschool students should be led through a self-paced study program where they can pursue mastery in their studies. Another difference that relates to this point is that the public school only operates 180 days of the year. That's why a strict schedule needs to be followed. There's only so much time available, and that the use of that time is scheduled, and the kids just run through that schedule. In a home school, there's no 180-day schedule. The parents and the children are together 365 days a year, and they can study as much as they want. Students at home are not led through a limited, scheduled program. They're not graded on their performance in that program based on time. They're led through a self-paced program with the entire year available for study, and they're allowed to pursue mastery of their studies at an individual level because they're studying privately with their own parents in their own home. Next, the public school curriculum is focused on modern mathematics and natural sciences. And we talked about why that is. It's not because you need to study modern math and science to be successful in life. That's really not why. The reason why is because since the public school has to stay away from religious subjects or controversial philosophical subjects, there are only so many subjects that can be safely taught in the public school. Two of them are modern mathematics and natural science. You can also teach foreign language. You can also teach English, language arts, and maybe get into some social studies. And when we look at the public school curriculum, that's all that's there. And like I said, the reason why is because this idea of separating church and state takes all religion and philosophy out of the school curriculum. When the kids come home for homeschooling, that's no longer necessary. And so a good homeschool education will be focused not on modern math and science, but a good homeschool education will be focused on philosophy and theology. The parents are free to teach their children their own convictions. It's not like a public school. The homeschool should be focused on philosophy and theology. And if we're talking about classical Catholic education, we're talking about Aristotelian philosophy and Catholic theology. A classical Catholic homeschool should not be focused on modern math and natural science as if that's an ideal. The public schools focus on those subjects because they have no other choice. Once we bring our children home and educate our own children, we're free to focus on classical philosophy and Catholic theology, and our homeschool curriculum should be focused on those important subjects. We should be asking, what did the saints study? What did the saints teach? When the saints organized schools throughout history, what did those schools teach the children? That's what we want to teach our children. And we'll see that the focus is on the classical liberal arts, classical philosophy, and Catholic theology. A homeschool program can focus on the convictions of the parents. That's a key difference in homeschooling. Next, as I said with the public schools, the study materials are designed to serve grade levels where children are grouped by age, and the study materials are intended to be used in the modern school calendar, in a scheduled program for children grouped by age who are simply going to be graded at the end of the year. The study materials in the public school program are not intended to lead individual children to mastery. When we come home for homeschooling, we want exactly the opposite. We want study materials that are designed for individual mastery. We don't want a grade 3 workbook. We don't want a 9th grade textbook. We want a book that's designed for an individual student to work through, to study for mastery of that subject. We want a book that can be self-paced, because if we have one child who's very bright and another child who's slow, we want to give our two children the same education, but allow them to work at their own unique pace. The same standards, but different pace. And we need study materials that are designed for individual students to study for individual mastery. We need different study materials for homeschooling. And lastly, The public school system, the public school program, and even private school program is designed for a large faculty of specialized teachers who work full time on their one specific grade level or one specific subject with one specific age group of children. And when we come to the homeschool, that's not true. In the homeschool, we don't have a large faculty of specialists in the homeschool. We have parents, maybe some friends, maybe a tutor, but we don't have a faculty of full-time specialists who are trained in college and in schools of education to serve and administer the public school system. In a homeschool, we have parents working with children. The parents aren't experts in the subjects, and they don't need to be if the study materials are prepared to be used in a homeschool environment. But we don't have specialist teachers, and I'm not saying specialist teachers are better. The system doesn't work. And the only reason it's even possible is because it's tax funded. Homeschooling study materials need to be designed for use by students and parents. Homeschool study materials need to be designed for use by students and parents, and often parents who don't necessarily know the subjects. Because if a parent wants to give his or her children the best possible education, it's very likely that the parent is going to want to give his children an education that he himself or she herself didn't have the opportunity to get. And we can't just say to those parents, tough luck, you missed out, so now your children also have to miss out. That's not necessary. But the study materials need to be designed so that a parent can use them and lead a children through the study of them successfully. Now, there are some other things that the parents may need to do. For example, in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, we offer services to the parents. We offer online quizzes, we offer grading services, we offer tutoring services. We provide those supplementary helps that parents may need. But the study materials have to be designed for parents to use with homeschooling children. They can't be designed for these full-time professionals who have nothing else to do but organize lesson plans, grade papers, and work with children in the school. The study materials have to be designed for parents because parents have other things to do. Homeschooling is not necessarily the parent's full-time occupation. In fact, it almost never is the parent's full-time occupation. Even if a woman has the privilege of staying home as a full-time homeschooling housewife, she still has lots of other stuff to do. She's got to take care of the house, she's got to take care of babies, she's got to help her husband, she's got shopping to do, housekeeping to do, meal preparation to take care. She's got a lot to do outside of homeschooling. She doesn't have the luxury of being able to plop herself down at a desk and have a paycheck delivered for her to work with the kids on their studies. Homeschool parents have other things to do. And so the homeschool study materials can't require lesson planning. They can't require organization. They can't require preparation of study materials. They can't require grading. They can't require tutoring, and so on. The study materials have to be designed for use by parents. Now, when we consider these things, it becomes very clear that using a K-12 grade level homeschool program makes no sense. The K-12 modern curriculum is not appropriate for homeschooling. Now, you'll find that almost every homeschool family you meet is using a K-12 grade level homeschool program. but you'll find that they're not doing well. The standards of their homeschool are so low that they almost can't justify homeschooling. The standards are so low. If you look around, you'll find that there are homeschool families who only work on studies 2 or 3 hours a day because there's so little to do in their grade level homeschool program, because it's not for homeschools. That curriculum is intended for public schools. The standards are the absolute lowest that the law will allow. It's completely inappropriate for homeschooling, especially for Christian families. But many homeschool families will accept low public school standards, give their children at home a modern grade level public school education using a homeschool program designed to serve K-12 grade levels. You'll see that the homeschool program is designed to only serve the public school calendar. They provide 180 days of materials or 36 weeks of materials for no reason, just because the public school is only in session for those days. So the homeschool must also only be in operation on those same days. It makes no sense. Why would homeschool families do that? Homeschool families have 365 days to study. And so when you look at other homeschool families and you see them using these K-12 grade level programs, you're going to see a couple of red flags that there are problems. One, you're going to see them only having school when public schools have school, which makes no sense. Second, you're going to see mothers try unsuccessfully to do what public school teachers do, organizing lesson plans, preparing study materials, buying books and study materials from all different sources, trying to put together study plans, and then having to grade their children's work, keep all of the records themselves. It's not appropriate for homeschool parents to do all of that stuff. School teachers are paid full time to do that work. Homeschool parents are not going to do that work effectively, and the homeschool can't be designed to require parents to do that. It's full-time teacher work that's created by the school system. It's not necessary at home. So you'll see mothers unsuccessfully trying to do the work that's done by a number of full-time teachers, and they'll do it unsuccessfully, or they simply won't do it at all. You'll see them only having school on school days, and you'll see them accepting the academic standards of public schools as the academic standards of their Christian homeschools, which again makes no sense. That's what most homeschool families are doing. And it's very simple. If you look at a family that's homeschooling, or if you look at a homeschool program and you see them selling you first grade, second grade, third grade, 10th grade, 12th grade materials, run for your life, because that's not appropriate for homeschooling. If you'd like to give your children a classical Catholic education, you need to have these 6 characteristics in your homeschool program. You need to realize that you're running a privately funded homeschool that's designed to serve the interests of your individual children. The study program should be designed to be financially affordable, sustainable, and intended for your individual children, not grade levels, not groups of children, your individual children. It shouldn't cost what public school study materials cost. That's not sustainable. The public schools are buying those supplies with tax money. You don't have that money. Private schools are buying those supplies by jacking up tuition to ridiculous numbers. You don't have that money for homeschooling, and you don't need that money for homeschooling. You need a program that provides you with sustainable, affordable study materials that are designed to serve the interests of your individual children. Secondly, your children are not going to be sorted into grade levels with peers of the same age. They're going to work together as family members at different age levels. You need a study program that serves a small number of children working together who are different ages at different levels of study. You need a homeschool program that provides you with the materials and resources needed for that environment. Third, you need study materials that lead your children through their lessons, task by task, so that they can work at their own pace and master their lessons, master the subjects. You need homeschool study materials that are designed for that purpose. You need homeschool materials that are focused on philosophy and theology because you're a private homeschool family and you're free to teach your children your faith and morals, your philosophical convictions. Your homeschool program should not be focused on math and science. Your homeschool program should be focused on religion and philosophy. As I said, a classical Catholic education should be focused on classical philosophy and Catholic theology. If you have a homeschool program, and at the center of that program are the same subjects in the modern secular public school, there's no way to explain why you're doing that at home when you're free to focus on philosophy and theology. Your homeschool program should be focused on philosophy and theology, not math and natural science. The study materials, like I said, should be designed for individual mastery. It's a different kind of study material. They should be designed for an individual student to work one task at a time from the beginning to the end of a subject. There's no grade levels, there's no tests, there's no grades. We want to teach our children at home, and we want them to have a 100% score on every single lesson. That's one of the advantages of working with our own children at home. We don't have to have a child who only learns 74% of his math lesson because it's time for the class to move on to the next lesson. We don't want to do that at home. We want to let our kid take his time, master his lesson, and then move on when he's ready. We want to give our kids a higher quality education with higher standards than a modern school can afford to give the kids. And lastly, you have to have a homeschool program that allows you to pursue high standards, but in a way that you, as a homeschool parent, can actually manage. It has to be designed so that you don't need to design your own curriculum. That's nonsense. You're not going to have time to design your own curriculum, especially when you have multiple children to take care of. You need a program that already has designed the curriculum. And in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, we use the curriculum that was designed by wise men and saints through history. Isn't that what you'd like to use? Or would you like to design your own curriculum? Why would any Catholic want to design his or her own curriculum? That's not what we want. We want to use the curriculum that was designed by history's wisest and holiest men. We want to use their curriculum, not our curriculum. You also need a curriculum that's designed for you to be able to use. You're not going to grade a high school student's papers. You're not going to be able to prepare lesson plans for 3 or 4 different children at different grade levels. You're not going to be able to organize and collect all kinds of different grade level and subject books and workbooks and all kinds of disposable school supplies. You're not going to be able to manage that effectively for your children. And it's not going to serve real Catholic educational standards anyway. Don't sign up for a homeschool program that you're not going to be able to manage because it's foolishly arranged for a school environment and not for a homeschool environment. You need a program that you can effectively manage at home in real life because you have other things to do. You need to be a mother and a wife. You need a homeschool program that's designed to be used by a mother and a wife, or by a father who's also a husband, who also has work to do. The homeschool program has to be designed to be successfully used by parents with students. Now, when you put all of these things together, you have what I will call a classical Catholic homeschool program. The only place that you will be able to find that is in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. The only place that you will be able to find a classical Catholic homeschool program that satisfies all of these requirements, that is actually appropriate to be used by a Catholic homeschooling family pursuing the right academic standards in the right way with realistic expectations, is the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. That's what's different about our program. It separates us from everyone else. Every other homeschool program you look at will be arranged according to the modern K-12 study program. And like I said, that's simply not appropriate for homeschooling. Every other homeschool program will be a K-12 program. It doesn't matter if they call themselves classical. That's just gimmick marketing. If you look at what they actually offer, you will see a math and science grade level public school program simply packaged in some clever way. But it's the same thing with all the same problems, not appropriate for a homeschool family. The only place that you will find all of these characteristics that provide your family with the opportunity to enjoy a classical Catholic education at home is the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. We've specifically designed our program to be effective in a Catholic homeschool environment. I use it myself as a homeschooling father. My wife works with our children and uses our program every day. She doesn't plan lessons. She doesn't prepare study materials. She doesn't tutor children. She doesn't grade any papers. She has a lot to do. She's a busy woman. And she enjoys the benefits of a homeschool program that allows her to have a good conscience and know that she's giving her children a true Catholic education, an education that the saints would recommend for our children. She's able to manage it. She doesn't live a stressed out, busy life with her entire life taken over by homeschooling. She lives a peaceful life. She enjoys her homeschool time with the children. She doesn't have pressure on her to be a teacher or to be a school principal. She doesn't have to manage all these things. She doesn't buy any books. She doesn't have to prepare study materials. She's able to simply enjoy homeschooling as a mother because our program is intended for Catholic homeschool students, not public school students. Everything that you need for a classical Catholic education as a homeschooling family is available in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. We offer every family the opportunity to study for free in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. And what that means is we make all of our study materials available to your family at no cost. You can sign up right now. You can create accounts for all of your children, no matter how many there are, and they can all study our study materials at absolutely no cost for as long as you like. The only thing that needs to be paid for is if you as a parent choose to have your children make use of our paid services, like online quizzes, assignment grading, tutoring, things like that. If you would like for your children to have access to those services, it's optional. And you can provide those services for one or all of your children. You can provide for one of your children by signing up for a student plan. It costs $25 a month. It provides a student with access to every single course that we offer, and it provides online quizzes for their lessons. It provides assignment grading for written assignments that are available. It provides them with access to help from full-time classical Catholic tutors, everything that you need to supplement your work as a homeschool parent. You can provide to one of your children for just $25 a month. And if you'd like to enroll more than one child, there's a cap set at $100. So the most that anyone will pay for their family, this is called the family plan, the most anyone will pay is $100. So whether you have 4 children or 9 children, the most you will ever pay would be $100 for those services that I just mentioned. And if you want more help or you want to pursue higher levels of service, there are other options available that you can upgrade to as you wish, or not at all. There's no other homeschool program that is designed for a Catholic homeschool family that allows your family, no matter what your academic background is, to pursue the highest academic standards, true classical Catholic education in your homeschool, regardless of your education, and does so affordably, like I said, financially sustainably, with realistic expectations set on the parents, designed for individual student mastery. Your kids are not just graded, but they're allowed to work at their own pace and study for mastery. There's no other program that makes this available except the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. So I don't want to turn this into an infomercial, but I want to make that clear what we offer Catholic homeschool families and how what we offer differs from what every other homeschool program offers. The modern public school program is not appropriate for homeschooling. The 6 characteristics of public schooling do not apply to homeschooling. Homeschooling serves different purposes. It requires different materials. It requires different methods. And if you want to pursue the highest level of Catholic academic standards, you have to have a homeschool program that's designed to allow you to do that. And you'll only find that in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. So I invite you to enroll and get started. Like I said, you can get started for free, and you can work for free as long as you wish. If you have questions, you can contact me at any time. You can write to me at mail@classicalliberalarts.com. There's a phone number on the Academy website. You can call anytime if you'd like to talk on the phone. And another free service that I offer parents is if you'd like me to provide you with a homeschool consultation. There's a form where I ask a number of questions, and you can take your time and write out answers to those questions, and then I'll take some time to read your answers and provide you with a video response where I go through those questions, go through your answers, and then provide some advice and direction to help you get started and to succeed and make a classical Catholic education available to your children at home. So if you'd like to make use of any of those services or get in touch, I invite you to do so. I hope that's a helpful overview of how classical Catholic homeschooling needs to differ from modern education and why modern homeschooling is not working. Modern homeschooling is not working. The infographic that I mentioned that I think you'll find helpful, I just want to remind you, is on the Academy website. If you go to classicalliberalarts.com and just search for the article titled "The Difference Between Modern and Classical Catholic Homeschooling," you'll find a helpful image that contains all of the content that I discussed in this talk. But like I said, if there's anything you'd like to talk about or any help at all that you need, just get in touch. My email is mail@classicalliberalarts.com. God bless.